Hey everyone, I've got my little friend here because it is spooky story time. It is now October, and this story is really spooky because it's actually a true story. So back in 2005, I started seeing a psychiatrist. Now, on the very first visit, my first day, he gave me a diagnosis within less than 10 minutes. And he also did something that you should never really do as a doctor, which was he decided to put me on 2 medications at the same time. So he started them both that same day. So one was Lamictal, which is a mood stabilizer, and one is Wellbutrin, which is the antidepressant. So he decided I had bipolar 2 disorder. So difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 is bipolar 1 is more of a manic episode. Bipolar 2 is when you are mostly in the depression side, and every once in a while you'll have a hypomanic episode or maybe even a manic episode, but there's a huge difference between the two. So anyway, he'd never seen me have a manic episode or a hypomanic episode. He never saw me have one the entire 4 years he treated me. But anyhow, he gave me those 2 medications the first day, which actually worked pretty fast, made me start feeling a little better. But the problem was we weren't really dealing with the underlying issue, which was the trauma. So that didn't really last. So then he had to switch to lithium because they use lithium for bipolar. So he ended up retiring. That psychiatrist is not even alive anymore at this point. The next one just went with the diagnosis, but he never checked my lithium levels. Ooh, no. So anyway, he never did labs to make sure that my levels were fine, even though he had me on a very high dose of lithium. Yikes-o. So I ended up in the ER one day. I had no idea what was wrong. I had called my primary doctor, and I was like, there's something going on. I don't feel well. And I was trying to describe to him, my head just was going crazy, but so was my body, my heart rate. I was having seizures. Anyway, my doctor said, he's like, Krista, well, are you okay? And that was not a question I knew how to answer, because I was like, well, no, clearly I'm not okay. But I'm not about to hurt myself. But anyway, since he was on the phone with me and it was 6 o'clock at night, he sent the police to come knocking at my door. So the police made sure that I got to the hospital. They did test my lithium level. However, it was at 1.4. which they generally kind of I don't know, maybe it's changed, but back then it was they don't start thinking about that until 1.6. But I'm a pretty sensitive person. Medications affect me pretty quickly. So guess what, guys? I was toxic on lithium at the 1.4. That was a level of toxic poison. So, rather than treat that, they stick me in the psych ward, give me more lithium because that was on my med list. They gave me another dose of the stuff that was poisoning my body, guys. So guess what? That made me even more crazy. And so they're oh, clearly this lady's in a manic episode. So they put me on an antipsychotic, one that was really extremely sedating for me. They decided to put me on Geodon, and it sedated me so much that all I did was sleep, and then they're like, oh, look, we got her out of the episode. She's fine now. Yeah, if you've ever been in the psych ward, like, it can be helpful for some, but for others, like, it may not be the most pleasant place to be, especially if something really is wrong, like medically, and they're not treating it, and you really should be in the hospital. But anyhow, they released me, and I remember I was like going to see my neurologist because this whole thing was like causing seizure-like activity. So I'm driving to my neurologist, and I can feel this stuff coming on. My heart rate, like, just like not feeling well, nauseated, like my head spinning, all these thoughts coming back. And I was like, I'm headed right back to the hospital. Like, I started praying, and I was like, if I don't figure out what's going on, like, I'm going right back to the psych ward, which didn't help the first time. And they didn't believe me while I was there. I kept telling them, like, no, I'm telling you, something is wrong with my body. That's what happened to me. I'm hoping it's better now. I'm hoping this kind of thing doesn't happen as often now, but that is exactly what happened to me, is they blew off all my medical concerns, because they just thought I was in some episode. Just, didn't get through to them. But when I got to my neurologist and he met with me, he started writing down the symptoms, and he was like, you know what? This is super weird, and I don't know why this has happened, but I've had a couple other people come to me, and I determined that they were toxic on lithium. I started bawling because, like, I knew he was right. I knew that's what was happening. So I was able to get home. The next, like, morning, I only took, like, half the dose. And guess what? My symptoms, like, were so much better. So called my doctor. We figured out how to, like, taper off of the lithium. But then I was still on this Geodon, which kept me sedated for a very long time. Like, so what would happen was, like, I'd be able to wake up in the morning and I would feel okay. But then as I'm out there on the freeway, just like driving along, I fell asleep. Like, I hit the Jersey barrier going like at least 70 on the freeway. And at that moment, while my hands were on the wheel, like, I wasn't driving the car. I wasn't cognitive enough, awake enough to understand what I needed to do, but somehow, like, I made it to work. As you can see, being on these medications that I never even needed in the first place, like, I don't need a mood stabilizer. I don't need an antipsychotic. Can have some serious consequences. It did some damage to my life. Super sad. Like, this can't happen anymore. We need to figure out how to listen to people, like, when they're talking, and treat them like people. We need to figure out this whole trauma situation. Like, come on, guys. Why is complex trauma not in the DSM? Like, when we're just throwing out diagnoses, and, my husband likes to say for a while, like, bipolar 2 was like candy. Like, that diagnosis was just being thrown out to everybody. This must explain all your symptoms. And, maybe it's not done as much anymore. I don't know. I do know a lot of people probably still have wrong diagnoses, and that's why I am talking on this platform, because you just heard this incredibly horrific story of how I couldn't get the help I needed, how my kidneys were damaged from this poison that was in my body. Luckily, they, like, recovered, but it took a long, long time. We had to monitor them for a long time, and I still don't know what long-term damage there's going to be. The psychological toll, the years and years of, like, getting to the right answers, getting the right help. We need to take this extremely serious if we are going to help people. And a lot of people are just struggling at this point. So, yeah, there is my horrific nightmare